Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another Indie Investor Pod. I'm excited to have another repeat guest on with me here today. So Nick Guilioni joining me again. Nick, you were on here before and brought a ton of value, so I had to have you back as you're starting to just do some different stuff, different mindset, and now I think you're just like a full-fledged Indiana person now. So you're now a Hoosier, I think. So you've been here for quite a long time, so compared to last time we talked. So thanks a lot for joining me, man.
Yeah, I'm really excited and definitely feel like a Hoosier at this point. Definitely feel like a native. I'm starting to settle in and figure out these roundabouts.
There you go. There you go. That's good. So I don't know. So I've been out here 6 years now, and I still get, when coming from Ohio, I still get like a lot of my Buckeye friends and stuff like that. They'll reach out to me every year and be like, "Hey, you're still rooting for the Buckeyes, not the Hoosiers yet. Have you changed like affiliations with any of your sports teams or anything since you've been here?"
I'm always going to be a Lakers fan. I'm
Yeah.
always going to be a USC Trojans fan. But my Colts here have stolen my heart and will likely have a secondary team of the Pacers.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can switch my college allegiance though at this point.
Yeah. So I'm in the same boat. So I'll pay attention to the Indiana sports. I'll root for them and stuff like that. But if they're playing any, the Browns, Buckeyes, no, I gotta leave that out. So. All right. So on that note, though, of you being in Indianapolis for a while now, like I want to kind of pick your brain about that. So you were living in California and then moved out here to Indianapolis as you're able to work remotely. You wanted to focus on your investments as you and Diane were investing here. So now that you've been out here for a while, I want to know, is there anything that you are now realizing about Indianapolis or some things that have like changed your mindset of like you didn't think of before, didn't notice before, but now it's like, oh, wow, yeah, this is like now that I'm here, I notice this.
Yeah, my brain goes a couple different directions with that. First and foremost is I was probably a better businessman when I was remote. Now that I'm here, I'm like actually finding myself at a lot of my job sites, and there are advantages and disadvantages to that. A lot of time spent checking things out, walking properties where before I would leverage other people. But what that's done is it's allowed me to learn a lot about real estate. I actually walk all of my inspections now and have my inspector point things out to me, so I know what to look for. I actually have gotten through that a little better at estimating rehabs without even having walked them. Things like that are particularly advantageous from being present. That's not necessarily Indiana specific, but being present with your investments.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana specific, I know they always say it's block by block. And you read that in all of the materials and everything that you put out there. But being out here, it really has been solidified. This is a block by block market, and you definitely want to, if you're remote, if you're in the area, you definitely want to make sure that you have somebody check out the property and not just make assumptions based on the indie investor map that might be out there.
Yeah.
And then I'd say kind of the last piece is I really viewed it as inside the loop before and outside the loop. And you just can't do that. Outside the loop is too big. Inside the loop is too diverse. So I would say that we spent a lot of time exploring and finding the markets within and outside the loop that really makes sense for us.
Yeah. So I want to recap a couple of those things. I think it is really important that's the biggest thing. And everybody says that hey, it's block by block and, sometimes even street by street, a little bit more granular than that. But it's really true of where sometimes you can't necessarily just look at the comps of like, hey, what's sold in the area. It's like, hey, if I drive down this street, have 2 or 3 properties been flipped here, or can you tell it's homeowners on this street, or is it a lot of tenants and stuff like that you can kind of look at and kind of get a feel for in those neighborhoods. But a lot of stuff you might not realize by looking at a map or looking at comps and things like that. It really is like sometimes you have to drive it or have people that you trust, to drive and stuff. So yeah, man, appreciate that and love to hear that. On that note, so I feel like you have now branded yourself as like the Irvington buyer. Like that's your thing. I know like your buddy Dan Perez like kind of branded himself as like the Bean Creek buyer a couple of years ago. We got Bo Kim who's trying to do the thing in Christian Park and stuff like that. But I want to talk about that a little bit. And obviously, you're buying more than just Irvington and some other places and things like that. But kind of 2 different questions here for you of how important it is as a buyer, especially in a competitive market like this, where you do kind of need to brand yourself as a buyer, whether it's a certain neighborhood or not, but like, hey, this is who I am. This is how I buy. This is how I operate. This is like, you need to kind of brand yourself as that to be competitive and be able to get the properties you need. But then also kind of the second part of that then is by picking like a certain certain neighborhood or a certain area or certain block or something like that, like, hey, I'm going to tackle this. Like, what kind of advantage does that bring to you as well?
Yeah, man, I can go on for a while on this one. Uh, I'll say first and foremost, what a lot of these investors don't necessarily realize is that you are a brand
Yeah.
as you are entering this market. We're not in a situation where you're God's gift to wholesalers or agents at this point. It's a very competitive market, and you have to brand yourself. You have to sell yourself in order to go out there and get deals and hustle on top of that. So there's a ton of value in establishing your brand. So I'll tell you where I think my brand is at this point. It's that I'm the creative finance guy. Like I'll find a way to finance just about any deal. That if I say I'm going to close on something, I'm going to close, and I'm not cheap. I will always do it the right way.
Mhm.
And more recently, like you were saying, Dan Perez and many of the other Indiana State group have kind of dubbed me the mayor of Irvington because I've been lucky enough to pick up a couple of properties, quite a few properties within Irvington, and there are tons of advantages to that. Right now, Brian, I'm sure you, Randy, and the rest of the team get dozens of emails on a weekly basis from people looking to either get started or expand their portfolio. And it's hard for you to know who to send a specific deal to.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of talk about putting together resumes. I think that's a really good idea for a lot of these investors, so that you can tack it up on your wall, or at least have some type of visual reference to what they're looking to buy. I'll tell you that me being the quote unquote mayor of Irvington actually has benefited me a lot. I was just honestly giving Randy a little bit of a hard time the other day on one of his properties in Irvington, and just saying, hey, I really hope you sold that house because you just set my comps. And what I mean by that is that he sold the house for a little more than I thought it was probably going to be worth, and by doing that, he actually, I can use that as a comp if I'm ever looking to refinance or sell one of my other homes in Irvington. And we were joking around a little bit. He comes back and says, speaking of Irvington, I happen to have this one house. So it's one of those things that you plant the seed with somebody that, hey, you're the Irvington buyer, you're going to close. And he ends up handing me a deal that never actually hit the public market. He said, hey, this is the price we need. And we came to an agreement right there. So tons of advantages to establishing yourself as a specific buyer, and kind of what your entire process looks like to wholesalers, to agents, to your contractors, because you do have to sell all of these individuals, all of these vendors on you for them to come and work with you at this point.
Yeah. No, I love it. No, it's really good stuff. And as you were talking, I kind of I started thinking about something, and this isn't like geared towards you or anything at all, just a thought that I wanted to put out there, just to, like, as we're talking about buyers and branding yourself and reaching out to people and making good connections. So you mentioned that, like, we get, a bunch of emails every week on people. They're like, hey, I'm looking in this area, I'm looking at this stuff. I think I had 3 conversations with buyers last week. And one of the first things that the buyer, like after I sent them a couple of properties, the first thing the buyer said to me was, well, what's the best number you can do? Like, honestly, like that's a tough thing. Like right now with the market the way it is, like that's not what I want to hear from a buyer. That's, we might have a relationship and I'll be like, hey, this is my price, I can do this and things like that. But as I'm looking at buyers and want to take people serious and start looking at that, that's probably not one of the first things you want to put out there. So a little tip on just people buying in general here in Indianapolis, that's probably not something that you want to say right away or look at that. And you even said, like, hey, I'll figure out a way to finance it. And sometimes if it's in a neighborhood that you like, you might have to pay a little bit more for it or something like that, especially right now. But it's all in what you want to do. You want to stay within your numbers and stuff like that. Not necessarily if you are branding yourself as a buyer, you don't want your brand to be like, hey, I'm the person that's going to like hammer you on the price like right away. And that's the first thing I want to look at is like, what's the best price I can do? I want to build a relationship, and hopefully because of that relationship, you can probably get a little bit better deals and things like that. And that's a great way to kind of go about that, I think.
Well, can I just tack onto there? There's been a deal recently that I did with you guys that I honestly I walked it. I went and got a scope of work from you guys, and I almost walked away from it because I didn't want to be viewed as kind of the cheap guy, And Randy finally just kind of forced it out of me. He's like, "All right, Nick, what's your number? Like, what would get it done?" And I went through and I actually justified exactly why I came to my price. I didn't just hammer you guys to try and get the best price for myself. It's like, hey, here's my scope of work. Here's where I think the ARV is. this is what I can offer. Like, let me know if that works for you. And it's a very different conversation than me just coming in and saying, all right, what's the best you can do?
Right.
You come in with a little bit of information, and if it doesn't work for you guys, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But actually coming in there with real justification for everything you're asking for.
Yeah. And I think the people that are selling properties right now, if you come in with that justification and kind of your numbers, and it just helps us educate ourselves more about the buyers and be like, oh, okay, this is what Nick's looking for. This is how he's running his numbers. And so all that information just helps out a ton. So I do want to talk to you too about, so one of the things that, as you're talking about, picking up properties and stuff like that. So I do notice a lot of times on some of the Facebook groups as people are getting ready to, maybe purchase their first property or they're getting started, you're one of the people that are like, hey, I would recommend working with an agent right away. I would maybe stay away from wholesalers starting off and things like that. And I actually agree with you on that as a wholesaler, even of like, but it's all about really just knowing your people and finding your people and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of legit wholesalers that you could probably start working with right away if you know them, know how they're operating, things like that. But I wanted to get your kind of take on that for those people that are looking to get started and really start kind of looking for that first property or their first couple properties or whatever. Why do you recommend just kind of working with that agent to start off with versus just sourcing something on Facebook from a wholesaler or anything?
Yeah, and I'm glad you're not throwing anything at me virtually here, because I know that's not a terribly popular opinion with a lot of people. The reason that I make that distinction for a lot of these people starting out is investing out of state is hard. And that's where a lot of these people are doing it from. Now, there are obviously some local people, but when talking specifically out of state, you need to build an entire team. You need to build, whoever your deal finder is, whether that's a wholesaler or an agent, you need to go through the entire transaction process. You need to have a contractor, an inspector, you need to have your property manager on the back end. And just all of that is a lot to do for your first deal. When we bought our first deal, it was actually a turnkey property. So the worst of the worst kind of starting out in a lot of ways that we paid probably above market and had the whole process handheld for us. And so I don't advocate anybody go that far. But when you're operating with an agent, generally speaking, they are going to have contractors that they work with. They're going to have inspectors they work with, lenders they work with, title companies that they're comfortable with. And despite all that, they have to act as your fiduciary, where that's not the case with any wholesaler that's out there, unless obviously they're an agent themselves, and there's some complexity that that gets into that kind of situation. So for all of those reasons, I generally would recommend, hey, start with an agent. Get the hand holding. You're going to pay probably a little bit more as a percentage of the after repair value, but you're going to have somebody looking over your shoulder who is supposed to be taking care of you in those situations. And now I think there are fantastic wholesalers. I think you guys are a fantastic example of that have really good morals and would help people along the process. But the truth of the matter is, you guys don't necessarily have a responsibility to the buyer. Right? You have a responsibility to your own shareholders, your own company. So for all of those reasons, I generally advocate that people start out in the with an agent, and then as they get more comfortable, as they've built their teams, absolutely go and work with you guys. I'm working with you guys regularly now. I'm working with other wholesalers regularly now. And I think that I am now equipped to do that and have enough knowledge and information to do that without putting myself into a bad situation.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times it's probably from, all those deals that you did with agents and, kind of building your knowledge that way. If you all of a sudden built your knowledge too on like the questions they were asking you or the information they're feeding you, that all of a sudden became questions that you knew to ask to wholesalers or other people that were sourcing the deals, and you kind of knew the part behind it. But you brought up a really good point too, of just the fiduciary part that like kind of they're responsible for that as well, or they're looking out for your best interest with that as well. That's not always the case with, other people that are kind of sourcing their properties that aren't licensed or anything. So no, really, really good tips, Nick. I really appreciate that. I kind of liken it to just a little bit of, financially, if you're starting off and you're doing your first, your first deal, your first flip deal or something like that, you might need to use a hard money lender where you're going to spend maybe a little bit more, but all of a sudden, now you understand the financials a little bit. You can start getting private money and you have case studies that you can show them, stuff like that. Where if you're working with agents or maybe you have to buy off the market, you have to pay a little bit more because it's off the market, but at least, it's kind of it kind of comes along with it and the information is given along with it versus just buying something that you find off Facebook or anything. So,
Yeah, and to that point, I don't think anybody gets rich off their first deal.
no,
My first deal was an absolute disaster, despite the fact that it was a turnkey. And I still made quite a few bucks on it over the course of the three,
yeah,
4 years that I held it. But in the grand scheme of things, it didn't make me rich. What it
right,
did is it got me in the game. And I
right.
think that's what a lot of people need to accomplish with their first deal or two, is just get in the game, figure out the systems. It's a process. Every single transaction is a process, and there are steps that need to be taken. Learn that process, learn who can handle the different steps for you, and then you can start accelerating and, like you were saying, finding other ways of financing and growing very quickly.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that actually I've seen kind of hurt people a little bit more when that first deal is like a great deal and you make a ton of money on it, or it's, just like a home run and stuff like that. That almost tends to like hamper people a little bit more because all of a sudden that's like their image of like, oh, I can do this every single time now. But those ones that like you need a little bit of help or you fall down a couple times, they're actually going to be the ones you grow from a little bit more to kind of get you to that point where it actually ends up being a better deal for you because you've learned so much from it. So,
Absolutely.
one of the things I want to talk to you about too. So you're starting at your Airbnb now here too in Indianapolis. What do you see as far as Indy goes of what advantages, or, kind of money making opportunities, investment opportunities does Indianapolis provide for Airbnb? I've always said, I now that I've been here for over 6 years and I kind of see how great Indianapolis is, like I can still see like, oh yeah, I could understand people coming here to visit. But I'm still at the same time like who like gets an Airbnb in Indianapolis a little bit? Like it's still kind of up there. And I know that's the question that a lot of people have, but it's actually one of the top states as far as like people that come to Indianapolis certain times of year. It's like rated in the top 5 sometimes too for Airbnbs and things. So what advice do you have for investors that are looking to do Airbnb as you're starting to pick that up yourself and things now?
Yeah, I'm actually sitting in one of my Airbnbs right now as having some construction done on my house. And what I'll say is Airbnb has been really interesting. We've only been at it for about 6 months now. We're starting to kind of get the hang of it. It's a lot more work. Just first and foremost, it's a lot more management. It's much more of a business. Now, again, like I was talking about previously, you can build systems for anything. You can outsource things. That's what we've done. We actually outsource and use one of your other guests, Elizabeth Sickles, as our
Yeah.
property manager here. She's awesome. So huge shout out. But what I'll say is that it's a little less consistent than the long term cash flow. And there's pros and cons to that. Some months you'll end up getting 30 days booked out of 31 and you're feeling fantastic, and then the next month you might only have 12 days and have it be a little bit less. And obviously it's much more seasonal than a traditional rental. So you need to kind of be cautious about that and make sure that you essentially have the reserves and you save up from the boom times into the winter. And I would say that's largely where we are right now. Ours is a little quieter at the moment. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, particularly if you balance it with a long-term portfolio as well. So you've got the long-term portfolio for the stability, and then you've got the high variance and high opportunity of the Airbnb. And like you were saying, there's sports, there are conferences, there's a ton going on. I'm looking forward to March Madness. I don't know when this episode's coming out, but that's definitely going to treat us very well. I know it's treating a lot of other investors that are doing something similar. It does cost a lot more to get started though. You have to outfit the property. Depending on the size, that could be upwards of 5 digits. And it's definitely an expensive proposition, but we're definitely going to keep expanding. It's not going to be the cornerstone of our business, but it's going to be one of those things that's fun and a little bit of a growth opportunity for us.
Yeah. So with the tournament coming up, that is going to be pretty exciting. There's always going to be opportunities like that here in Indianapolis. It's like one of the number one. I know COVID, it's always a little weird, but now Indianapolis is always one of the top convention places where people come for conventions, whether it's medical conventions or volleyball tournaments, things like that. There's always a lot of things here, but yeah, the tournament coming up, March Madness is going to be pretty exciting. They just said that we get 25% of it's going to be full, so there will be some people coming to Indianapolis. We will get some visitors, so that's all good stuff.
And I'm sure everyone's going to be following the rules too. And there's not going to be parties or anything like that during that time.
Right. So, no, that's good. One of the other things, I know that one of the things I appreciate about you, so much. And I know a lot of our conversations and I just had, some of the other out-of-state investors on for, a little roundtable on here a couple episodes ago. But one of the things that I appreciate about you along with them is that you guys are givers. This reason you wanted to, jump on this podcast with me is the reason we do it, but like being able to give back a little bit, and give back through information. Like, hey, here's where I messed up. Here's a mistake I made. Here's what it is, or here's what I recommend. Here's where you can learn from. But one of the things you also have, you've talked with me about, and you've kind of put out there as well. You want to help. Your goal is, let me get this right. You want to help 1 million people just become financially stable, or kind of have that just understanding and things. So talk about that a little bit, like what that means to you and how you're doing that through real estate as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to help 1 million people improve their financial position. That doesn't necessarily mean be financially free, but just improve that position. Generally what I found, and to your point earlier, a lot of people start in the real estate game to make themselves rich. And honestly, that was a large part of the reason why I started doing it, is because I wanted to improve my financial position. But with all the investors I deal with on a daily basis, I really have seen kind of a through line. And it's that after they start to feel success, they want to pull other people up along with them. Those three that you had on that roundtable, that 2-part episode, absolutely fantastic. Awesome people who I talk to almost on a daily basis, are just constantly giving back. And I want to do the same. 1 million people, I definitely need to get on a whole lot more podcasts and get that ripple effect and help people along the way. But for me, I've been incredibly blessed throughout my entire life. I've had incredible parents who taught me more than I could possibly let anybody know. And for me, I just want to pay that forward as much as humanly possible. So I hop on calls on, probably 5 to 10 calls every single week with people trying to get started either in investing in Indianapolis, improving their financial position, saving, money management, all of those things. I just, kind of give my time to try and to try and help them along the way, because my belief is that a lot of people are slaves to their jobs. They have to go to work in order to pay their bills. They don't have another option. And I do believe that if people are choosing to work, you're going to have a very different world. If people are going and doing what they're passionate about, the world will improve a lot. And so the way we're doing that, like I said, we're doing the phone calls. Diane writes an incredible blog where we talk a lot about our investing journey, some opportunities that are out there, getting started, tons of topics that people have asked us about. And we're just trying to kind of get that ripple effect such that, we help one person and we hope that it passes it along. And I think that's how we're going to hit that goal.
Yeah, no, it's so incredible. And I love that. And I love your guys' heart about that too, being able to help, 1 million people just improve their financial, situation and stuff like that, where you, like that you talk about, you were kind of more than blessed to like have, parents that kind of ingrained that in with you into you and helped you out with that and stuff like that. I'm on the opposite end of like, kind of like where my parents always lived paycheck to paycheck. They still do. And that's how I was for so long, being a teacher for 14 years, where it's just like, hey, I try to save as much as I can, but I don't know what to do with it and that type of stuff. So being able to have people like you to kind of put that stuff out there and then talk about experiences and what you can do with it and education out there, I think is awesome and stuff. And so that you mentioned the blog that Diane writes up and things, and we'll give her all the credit for that and stuff. So
she earned it.
So where can people go? Where can they find that? Where can they read those? Because they are incredible articles.
Yeah. So it's all up at giulionirealestate.com. It's GIULIONI. It's a lot of vowels. I apologize, guys. Maybe we need to come up with something a little pithier. But yeah, she writes up a blog, I would say about one a month, and she really sits down and spends a lot of time thinking about it. And we talk about it, and honestly, taking a page out of your book, we're looking to actually just turn our conversations about the blog into a podcast in and of itself. So lots of opportunities to kind of learn from her, from me. And plus, if anybody, like I was saying, I have calls with people. If they want to schedule time on my calendar, you can also find a link to my calendar at that same website and just schedule a time.
Yeah. I want to talk to you because we're in the same boat and kind of turned on to this thinking as well. And one of the things that you mentioned before we were just talking before this episode started, that a lot of times too with those blogs, it's saved you time. Obviously it takes time to do that and you guys doing that, but it's saved you time because a lot of times people are going to have the same questions for you, and people are going to be asking those, reaching out to be like, hey, Nick, do you have some time for this? Or, hey, Brian, can you jump on a call with me for this? A lot of times when you have that stuff already prepared, it's like, hey, why don't you go ahead and read this article or watch this video or listen to this podcast, and then reach out if you have any questions. A lot of times too, you kind of you figure out the legitimacy of those people asking those questions too, because are they going to do it or not? But then also it does end up saving you time and gives them a little bit more information than maybe they even would receive just through a phone call or something, because it's all right here. It's all been written. It's all been, produced and stuff like that. So what does that mean to you, be able to just with that, of being able to like, hey, here's an article and here's this, and then we can have, I feel like the follow-up conversations end up being so much better and so much more in depth because they've already informed themselves over what they want to talk about.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally, you're absolutely right. That's actually why we started the blog. Diane would hear these conversations and I would have the same conversation telling my story, talking about what a BRRRR was, talking about seller financing. There were a variety of topics that she was seeing. I kept having the same conversation. And that's why she started the blog, is to essentially save my time. She knew I enjoy having the tactical conversations. I want to go deep. Let's talk about a deal. Let's talk about, a very specific, mechanism by which you're going to take down a property. I don't want to kind of give you the background. That's information that you can get pretty easily. So yeah, she started the blog, and if you sign up for my Calendly, which is the calendar tool I use, you'll actually get an email where it basically says, hey, here are some topics that I often get asked to talk about. Read these articles first, and then let's go deeper. Let's have a deeper conversation once that has occurred. So it's been absolutely fantastic, and you're totally right. I can tell when people haven't done their homework, and I will ask them to reschedule in a lot of cases, and say, hey, come on back once you've read these 3 articles, and then we can have another conversation. Because I do want to give back. I want to, like I said, I want to help 1 million people, but if you're not willing to kind of meet me halfway, it's not a good opportunity.
Yeah. So no, good stuff. So as we wrap up this episode, Nick, is there anything else that you wanted to mention or talk about that we haven't brought up yet?
At this point, not a ton. I do want to really call out, I know you had Ernesto on the podcast a couple episodes ago. Really want to call out and just say, hey, him and Bo Kim are starting up a remote real estate investors group. I think everybody should check it out. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for people looking to expand beyond Indianapolis in particular, which I think is a fantastic market, but do want to make sure that they get the recognition and the traffic that they deserve, because they're doing awesome stuff up there.
Yeah. And there's so many good resources on that page too, of like people, what's going on, and like what works in Philly or what works in St. Louis. It's going to work here in Indianapolis too, in a lot of parts and stuff. So it's just another way to educate yourself on what you can do to be able to invest remotely. Or, I mean, I've even picked up tips of like, oh, okay, why didn't I think about that yet? I'm going to do that here and stuff. So it doesn't have to be remote investing. It can help you out wherever you are. So good stuff, man. Do you want to show off your t-shirt or anything before we get out of here too?
Yeah. I starting up a new brand. Hopefully the 2 chicks and a hammer don't get too offended, but for our little construction, we're going to start being 2 dogs and a tool. Anybody who wants a shirt can reach out. More than willing to send it and advertise our 2 golden retrievers who are our children.
So awesome stuff, Nick. Really appreciate you joining me again this time. And with that, if you need anything at all, actually, let me put this out there. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to me at brian@simplewholesaling.com. More than happy to help out. If you want any information about what we're doing here or any properties or neighborhoods here in Indianapolis, definitely reach out and ask. If you have any suggestions on episodes we can do in the future, let me know. And with that, we will jump out of here, and we'll see you guys next time on the Indy Investor Pod. Take care.